the Wraith Ascendancy. Welcome to Factopedia. This is an independent galactic resource for fact-checked data on modern and historical events within the Alrexian Galaxy. These holos are created and edited by members. To be a member, an individual must be a licensed scholar, appointed ambassador, public relations official, or communications director from any existing company, political party, government, or faction. This is to avoid as much bias as possible. The final official version of each holo is voted on by these members for accuracy. If there is a major dissent from the majority vote by an official member, their individual take on the subject will be included at the end. The topic of this Factopedia Holo is the Wraith Ascendancy. Throughout the centuries, the oppressive rule of the Ilred Empire led to a massive increase in poverty and starvation throughout the planets they ruled. Noble clans that supported the Ilreds were allowed to take control of large areas and oppress their people, forcing them to produce food and resources in slave-like conditions. In 3211.05, as the First Galactic Dominion War consumed the galaxy, a group of peasants and lesser noble families rose up within the heart of the Ilred Empire, under the leadership of a man named Proxindi Wraith. Utilizing the discontent caused by the miserable conditions that the peasants endured, Proxindi Wraith ignited a civil war within the Ilred Empire, promising to bring a new government with equality to all peasants, and the fall of the tyrannical Ilred dynasty. The motto and banner of the rebellion was "All in the Name of Equality." What started as violent riots quickly grew into a full-scale civil war. The civil war spread until the entire empire was divided between the imperialists and the equalists. Fighting lasted for months, Ecloctech Plus, until it finally reached the capital planet. In fear, Emperor Zaxxon, Ilred IV, called his remaining fleets back from the front lines against the coalition. But it was too late. The capital planet was overrun by the equalists. Emperor Ilred and everyone that shared his last name was publicly executed. The majority of the remaining Ilred Empire fleet was destroyed from the coalition forces on one side and the equalists on the other. Only his nephew, Erastus Ilred, escaped with a small fleet to a planet in the farther edge of the galaxy, which remained loyal to the Empire. The capital planet was renamed Wraith. On 3211.10.1.01, a new governmental system was established and named the Wraith Ascendancy. The families that belonged to the formal noble clans were subjected to slavery. The Equalist Party Assembly was formed as an oligarchical system with leaders of all the former non-noble clans taking seats in the party, with members of the Wraith clan taking most of the seats. Members of the Party Assembly serve until death and appoint their own replacements prior to death or retirement. The emblem of the Wraith Ascendancy, faction color red. The military structure was rearranged. Citizens were allowed to go to military school to become officers. Exemplary students gained the title of commander. Each commander had military forces divided between them equally. The commanders were given a lot of autonomy with their forces, without an executive leader or position above commander. Due to this, it is argued that the true power of the Wraith Ascendancy is in the collection of nearly 50 commanders and their autonomous fleets, and not the Equalist Assembly. However, members of the Empire History Center disavow those arguments and state that the commanders must follow the orders of the Equalist Assembly. If they do not, the Equalist Assembly can rule by majority vote to remove commanders from power and have them replaced. Industry and economic production were taken over completely by the Wraith Ascendancy. Many new bureaucratic departments were created to regulate nearly every aspect of citizens' life. Disobedience and opposition are met with swift punishment. The Wraith Ascendancy argues that equality for all people will be obtained, and all slaves will be freed once the galaxy has been conquered and every citizen has been converted to the Equalist Party platform. As time has passed since its founding, by marriage or legal name change, more citizens living under the Ascendancy took upon themselves the last name Wraith. On 3220 a law was passed that all citizens on planets controlled by the Wraith Ascendancy that are not slaves must take upon themselves the last name of Wraith. This dissolved the existence of any other families and noble clans. Since then, all planets which have been annexed or conquered by the Wraith Ascendancy have required the citizens of those planets to change their last names to Wraith to be accepted as equal citizens. Those who refused or openly opposed the occupation of the Wraith Ascendancy were made into slaves. As the power of the Wraith Ascendancy grew, it became clear to the galaxy that in the place of the Ilred Empire, a new, more dangerous tyranny had risen to take control. Governments have found that it is far more difficult to win the ideological argument against the Wraith Ascendancy banner, all in the name of equality, than it was to argue against obvious tyranny of the Ilred Empire. After several decades of uneasy peace, the outbreak of the Second Galactic Dominion War came with little surprise to scholars that had studied the events that unfolded within the Wraith Ascendancy. By 3227, both the Wraith Ascendancy and the Federal Alliance had each taken control of 1/4 of the galaxy. Their ideological clashes concerning individual liberty, property, and justice have turned hot on several occasions. The Second Galactic Dominion War began on 3228.06.2.03, when the Wraith Ascendancy invaded a neutral planet that had an abundant supply of resources and was negotiating to join the Federal Alliance. The extent of the horrific amounts of casualties that this war has brought are astronomically greater than the First Galactic Dominion War. Weapons which were unimaginable that were in early and limited use during the First Galactic Dominion War have become commonplace in this one. The brutality of the Second Galactic Dominion War has only increased with the rise of two other factions participating in the war for their own goals. The Treyas Rebellion and Cartel Trade Corporation have made the war even more complicated and dire. The Wraith Ascendancy is one of the 4 major factions and one of the 2 superpowers participating in the Second Galactic Dominion War. It has been in a costly stalemate with the other superpower, the Federal Alliance, since 3228.06. The war has lasted for almost 20 years. However, throughout that time, there have been several Cold War periods and ceasefires without many military engagements. The hot full-scale war began again 3 years ago, from the time this holo was uploaded in 3242.07. This is due to the formation of the Treyas Rebellion, which antagonized the Wraith Ascendancy. However, research suggests that the Wraith Ascendancy was preparing for a full-scale invasion of the Federal Alliance in the years prior to the outbreak of the conflict. Major dissent from Ambassador Yurza Wraith of the Wraith Ascendancy. This Unfactopedia has the audacity to claim that our ascendant society of equality for all is a tyranny. The Ilred Empire was a true tyranny. I ask this institution, who was it that defeated them? It wasn't the coalition of sovereign systems. It wasn't the Federal Alliance. It was us. We defeated the Empire. We saved the galaxy from its tyranny. If it wasn't for the courageous men who fought waving our red flag, the galaxy would march in step to the orders of the Ilred Empire. Many of us were alive when the Ilred Empire ruled over our sector of space. Many of you in the Federal Alliance had the luxury of not having to live under it. In the Ilred Empire, everyone was a second-class citizen to the clan of Ilred. Now, today, we are all equal. We are all Wraith. We share equal property, equal abundance, equal hope in a brighter future. We encourage you to join us, all in the name of equality. Major dissent from the exalted Minister of Media for the Ilred Empire. This holo falsely accuses His Honorable Majesty Emperor Zaxxon Ilred, may he rest in peace, of being an equal participant in a so-called civil war against his own subjects. The events that transpired were nothing more than insignificant acts of domestic terrorism. This holo fails to report that the reason His Honorable Majesty did not call back his armies for several months, at Glocktalk Plus, is that he was reluctant to kill his own subjects and was willing to forgive their transgressions as an act of selfless love. Now, how did these terrorists repay him for his generosity? They murdered him. They murdered his family. They murdered their divinely appointed emperor. They ended his valiant crusade to spread truth, justice, and security across the galaxy. In his place, these terrorists have constructed a regressive society based on unsustainable economics. The Wraith Ascendancy is destined to descend back into the gutter from whence it rose. May its red flag burn in red flame and smolder into black ashes. To learn more about the other 4 factions participating in the Second Galactic Dominion War, please continue watching our New Year's Factopedia History Holos. This Factopedia Holo was uploaded on New Year's Day, 3245.01.1.01. This is a multi-part historical record to explain the history of the Alrexian Galaxy, as well as the most recent current events. This Factopedia Holo was made possible by the Cooperative Interstellar Society of Historical Research, our partners and members, and by donations from across the galaxy, which includes people like you. To gain more insightful knowledge about history, please consider supporting us. Thank you, and Holo.